This video is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon! It could also be brought to you by other stuff. This is where ad reads would go. Come on guys, I'll even do Raid Shadow Legends. Hit me up. We've discussed at length how Nickelodeon utilized older television shows, programs that would play to the nostalgic sensibilities of baby boomer parents, the ones who actually paid for the cable packages. This was always a challenge for them, a balancing act, finding just the right show that had enough marquee value for the parents, but still had appeal for younger contemporary audiences. And then at some point, somebody in the Nickelodeon offices went, "Whoa, hang on, what are we doing? If we're gonna do retro television, let's do retro cartoons." In 1988, Nickelodeon introduced classic Looney Tunes into their daily lineup, and it was a major success, maintaining good ratings well into the 1990s, sometimes even beating out Nicktoons. And when something does well on Nickelodeon, we gotta try it a half dozen times more. As the channel rolled into the 90s, several classic animations were added to the rotation. Eventually, Knacks will be seeing the likes of Gumby, Rocky and Bullwinkle, Underdog, and Alvin and the Chipmunks. In October of 1990, Nick would kick off this trend with two different shows profiling older animation. One saw the return of one of Hanna-Barbera's big stars, a bear with a big brain and an even bigger stomach. The other, which we'll be looking at today, went in a more obscure direction. Premiering on Nickelodeon on October 7th, 1990, this is Cartoon Kablooey.
Sunday mornings, your parents are... But you're not, and you want some... Kablooey! So watch Nickelodeon's Cartoon Kablooey, the new show with plenty of... half-hour guaranteed! Mamma mia! So brush your breakfast and eat your teeth, because you're in for some... Wake up the house with Nickelodeon's Cartoon Kablooey!
You won't regret it.
Sunday mornings at 9, 8 Central on the network that brings you what you want!
Cartoon Kablooey is about as simple a program as you can get. Nickelodeon purchased a couple of syndicated packages of some older cartoons, mixed them together, made a quick intro, and aired it on Sundays at both 9 and 11 a.m. It didn't even get a package show framing device. It was very much filler programming. Sunday mornings was a notorious dead zone for television, a mix of late weekend malaise and a sizable chunk of the US population going to church services. But, filler it may be, it was undoubtedly trying to get that Looney Tunes lightning to strike twice. The cartoons came from two different sources: United Productions of America, or UPA, the home of Gerald McBoing-Boing and Mr. Magoo, and the Paramount Cartoon Studios, the home of, Honey Halfwitch. Actually, they created a number of memorable characters like Casper the Friendly Ghost and Baby Huey, but none of them showed up on Cartoon Kablooey. We'll get into why in a bit. Now, UPA. If you're an animation nerd, you probably already love UPA. While the company had fallen into semi-obscurity by the tail end of the 20th century, it had something of a reappraisal in recent years. There's a number of books and fellow YouTube amateur documentaries on the rise and fall of the company, its place as an artist-driven alternative to the growing homogeny in animation brought to you by Disney and Warner Brothers has been well celebrated as of late. But in case you don't know about them and need a crash course, well, here we go. On May 29, 1941, animators at Walt Disney Productions went on strike in response to Disney refusing to recognize the Screen Cartoonists Guild, a unionization effort within the theatrical animation industry. Not the first animator strike, that would be the 1937 strike against Fleischer Studios, put a pin in that for later, but it was certainly the highest profile strike. More than 200 members of Disney staff started striking during the production of Dumbo, and they were striking theatrically with prop guillotines and puppets. It concluded almost 4 months later, on September 21st, with Walt Disney finally signing a union contract. But by then the company had lost around 500 staff members, over 40% of the studio's original staff. Many of these animation talents scattered to other companies, or in some cases, they founded their own animation studios. Such was the case with Stephen Basusta, David Hilberman, and Zach Schwartz, who founded the Industrial Film and Poster Service at the end of the year. They wouldn't make their first cartoon until 1944, with Hellbent for Election, a political short promoting the presidential re-election of Franklin D. Roosevelt, portraying the man as a sleek, modern train against Thomas E. Dewey's old clunker. Directed by a moonlighting Chuck Jones, Hellbent for Election was well received, seen by more than 10 million people, and it didn't hurt the studio's reputation that Roosevelt would win the election. This got their foot in the door with the US government to produce wartime animation, and the studio realized, hey, maybe we should get a good name, and they became UPA. What made UPA stand out among its contemporaries was its house style. Most American animation studios around this time were opting for realistically proportioned, detailed animation. I mean, obviously a talking rabbit isn't realistic, but Bugs Bunny holds himself with a consistent weight in a real enough world. And that's to say nothing of the rise of rotoscoping as seen in things like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Fleischer Studios' Superman shorts. UPA went and said, this stuff's just got no style. UPA was stylized up to its eyeballs. Minimalist backgrounds, playful perspectives, character designs that were representational but hardly realistic, flat colors, and jazzy scores. This allowed them to do more than just character-driven gag cartoons, though they did do plenty of those. But they also did musical courtroom dramas, domestic scenes involving unicorns, and even haunting adaptations of Edgar Allan Poe.
I had to stop it.
After the war, UPA found itself contracted by Columbia Pictures, and under them they created their two big franchises. In 1949, the short Ragtime Bear introduced the world to Mr. Magoo, a fun-loving though somewhat cranky millionaire with terrible eyesight, who would blunder his way into adventure and not even know it.
Coming! Coming! Wrap everything in cellophane these days. Right away, I hear you.
It's never sticky, never gummy, dries instantly, even dries underwater.
No, out! Confounded salesman.
Voiced wonderfully by Jim Backus, Magoo was a mix of W.C. Fields and co-creator Millard Kaufman's own eccentric uncle. Mr. Magoo would be the closest thing UPA had to a Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse, their big money-making franchise. Between 1949 and 1960, the character starred in 56 theatrical shorts, 2 of which won the Academy Award for Best Short Cartoon Subject, and 1 full-length theatrical film. And then UPA pivoted to television, and look out, 3 entire Mr. Magoo series between 1960 and 1977, and 2 television specials, including Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, which is a top 10 Christmas Carol adaptation for me.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Don't you believe in knocking?
And then there was 1950's Gerald McBoing-Boing. Based on a Dr. Seuss story, the cartoon revolves around a young boy's inability to speak anything beyond a boinging noise, and how his parents, authority figures, and the rest of the world respond to this odd trait. The short won UPA an Academy Award, and while it wasn't as marketable as Magoo, Gerald McBoing-Boing would reappear in 3 more shorts and a proper Freddy vs. Jason crossover short with Magoo.
We're coming down! Great Scott! Oh, the little beggar climbed too high. Hold on now, pup.
Oh my gosh.
In 1956, there was the Gerald McBoing-Boing Show, a television compilation of various UPA shorts. It was short-lived, but reruns ran on Friday nights in 1957, making it the first animated show to air on primetime, beating out the Flintstones by 3 years. Sadly, UPA was one of those companies that burned bright for about a decade and then completely burned itself out. The transition from theatrical shorts to television was not an easy one for UPA, and the Magoo movie, 1001 Arabian Nights, flopped in the box office, ending the company's relationship with Columbia Pictures. The company would end up being sold to producer Henry G. Saperstein, who in 1970 pivoted UPA to foreign film distribution, mostly Japanese kaiju movies. UPA officially closed its doors in 2000, but it had stopped being an animation company in 1970. Ownership of UPA's theatrical shorts were retained by Columbia Pictures, who licensed them for television syndication. And in 1990, Nickelodeon paid for that license. Sadly, given the show's obscurity, we don't have an exact list of the shorts that aired on Cartoon Kablooey, but I do have 2 complete episodes in my possession, sent in by a generous viewer. Thank you so much. So let's look at the 4 UPA shorts presented here. Unsurprisingly, 2 of them are Mr. Magoo cartoons, The Dog Snatcher and Hotsy Footsie, both from 1952. In the former, a high-on-powered dog catcher threatens to take away Magoo's dog if the old man doesn't license his mutt. It's too bad that Magoo has confused a panther at the nearby traveling circus for his dog.
I warned you, Magoo. Now I'm taking away your yak! Yak! He's a spaniel.
The latter sees Magoo going to a swinging party, but when it comes time for the dance contest, Magoo accidentally wanders out of the dance hall and into a wrestling ring. Magoo cartoons are fun enough, if a bit repetitive and binge-watching, but they were a compromise between UPA's house style and general audience appeal. For something more representative of UPA sensibilities, consider 1955's Christopher Crumpet's Playmate, a sequel to Christopher Crumpet, a whimsical tale of a boy having a day out with his imaginary friend, Webster the Elephant. But he might not be as imaginary as first thought.
Hey, what's going on?
Giddy up!
You know, Abigail, I'm beginning to believe Christopher really does have an elephant.
Of course! Believing is seeing. Webster likes you, Daddy.
Now this is UPA. Characters made of simple shapes and solid colors, no backgrounds to speak of, tons of abstraction. Look at that chair. Half drawn, half cubist, I love it. It's not one of UPA's all-timers, it's not a laugh riot, but it has all the charm that made the studio so beloved today. The 4th and final UPA short in these 2 episodes is 1954's Bringing Up Mother, which is a step less abstract but just as stylish, the story of a young boy coming to terms with a new sibling on the way.
Come on, Critter! Let's go! Johnny, stop! Stop right now! Whoa, Critter! Mom, we're playing stagecoach.
These are the shorts I can confirm, but I don't see any reason why Gerald McBoing-Boing or Madeline or any other UPA short wouldn't have aired on Cartoon Kablooey. They would have all been part of the same syndication package. But I guess it wasn't going to carry a show on its own. This was 1990, probably when UPA was at its most unappreciated, no longer contemporary and groundbreaking, nor yet reappraised by animation history nerds. So Nickelodeon opted to combine their library with that of Paramount. Sort of. A bit of it. It's complicated. The story of Paramount Cartoon Studios begins with another much more beloved animation studio, Flesher. The creators of Betty Boop and the Popeye the Sailor Man cartoons, Flesher Studios were major innovators in animation technology. And you may remember from earlier that Flesher Studios faced a union strike in 1937. The Flesher cartoons had been distributed by Paramount Pictures, with 52 annual releases in 1936, but Paramount wanted more. Flesher Studios attempted to expand its operations, but was cut short when an already overworked staff went on a 5-month labor strike. This hobbled Flesher Studios' expansion, delayed projects, and cost the company a lot of money. The studio moved from New York to Miami, Florida in an attempt to take advantage of some tax exemptions and get away from the unions, which put strain on the relationship between brothers Max and Dave Flesher, who stopped speaking to each other in 1939, the same year their first theatrical film, Gulliver's Travels, hit theaters. The production of that film had gone way over budget, tightening Paramount's control of the company, and not even Flesher's highly praised Superman shorts could stop the company's downhill slide. On May 25, 1941, Paramount took complete control of the company. The Fleischer brothers were forced to resign, and the final Fleischer brothers cartoon was the Superman short, Terror on the Midway. Paramount took the company's staff and assets with intent to make their own animation in-house, and on July 3rd, 1942, it was rebranded as Famous Studios, an allusion to Paramount's original name, the Famous Players Film Company. They continued to produce Popeye shorts for another 15 years. Those were still the moneymakers, but the Superman shorts ended swiftly after. It turns out extensive rotoscoping is pretty expensive. It was replaced with another comic property, Little Lulu. In 1943, Famous Studios began Novel Tunes, their attempts at a properly branded cartoon series like Looney Tunes or Silly Symphonies. It was in this space that the studio developed characters like Little Audrey, a replacement for Little Lulu when Paramount decided they didn't want to pay the licensing royalties. And then there was the Tom and Jerry knockoff Herman and Catnip, and in 1945, Casper the Friendly Ghost, based on an idea by Seymour Wright and Joe Oriolo. They got paid $175 for the idea and not a cent of residuals. Know what you're worth, kids. Casper was a new moneymaker for Famous Studios and really the only property of this era with any staying power. But it was clear that Paramount wasn't even close to competing with the larger studios. They just didn't have much to distinguish themselves. Novel Tunes were basically store-brand Looney Tunes, basically competent but mostly formulaic, and lacking a unique style to make them stand out in the crowd, lacking the innovative spirit of the Fleischer studio that preceded them. Paramount made no secret that they were driven by profit, and would pinch every penny they could to get a set amount of content out the door. As the 1950s marched on, things got cheaper and assets disappeared. Paramount would end up selling most of their pre-1950 library to UM&M TV Corporation, a short-lived television distributor and commercial producer. This included most of the Fleischer output, minus the Popeye and Superman cartoons, adding up to 1,600 shorts and 2 feature-length films. In 1957, UM&M was bought by National Telefilm Associations, or NTA. In 1956, Famous Films was downsized and consolidated, dropping the name and rebranding itself as Paramount Cartoon Studios. And the budgets kept getting cut, the pennies kept getting pinched. In just 10 years, Paramount went from making cartoons that looked like this to cartoons that looked like this. Frames down into the single digits, painfully obvious animation cycles, and character lines thick enough to walk on. I need to stress, this was the fault of the money men at the top, not at the creatives toiling away below. The sales department at Paramount was a bunch of fat, cigar-chewing gentlemen who looked at these new things I was attempting in horror. They got more and more hostile. They said, "Why can't you figure out something like Bugs Bunny?" And I tried to explain to them that Bugs Bunny didn't come about because somebody said, "Let's make Bugs Bunny." It had to be done almost by accident to find a character who was a good actor. It just happened. But they didn't believe it. They thought I was lying down on the job. They were old, tired guys who symbolized some of the antique attitudes in the business. Paramount sold their cartoon library again in 1959, selling all the shorts from 1951 to present to comic book publisher Harvey Comics, who had been making licensed comics for Casper and Baby Huey for years up to this point. Harvey Comics not only had the rights to the shorts, but to the intellectual properties themselves. Paramount couldn't make another Casper short if they wanted to. It would be Universal, not Paramount, who would make the 1995 Casper movie. Paramount Cartoon Studios had sold off its own legacy for scrap, twice, forcing to reinvent itself over and over again, with smaller budgets each time. The animation studio would only last until December of 1967. A fun fact, Ralph Bakshi was actually the creative head of the studio in its final months. He came in way too late to actually get anything done, and I doubt he would have shaken things up too much. This was pre-Animation Rebel, pre-Fritz the Cat Bakshi we're talking about. But fun fact. In any case, Paramount Cartoon Studios closed up shop after 24 years, but with only 7 years of cartoons to syndicate out to television. But it was this paltry syndication package that Cartoon Kablooey is almost entirely built upon. The intro? It's all Paramount clips, no UPA. The faces on this title screen, including the Native American caricature, all Paramount characters. The commercials for the show I played earlier, all Paramount. You would think they would at least throw in a shot or two of Mr. Magoo. That character still had some name value. His Christmas Carol was still being broadcast pretty much every year. Now, this is entirely my speculation, but what I think might have happened is that Nickelodeon initially just got the syndication rights to the Paramount cartoons and wrote up a contract saying, yes, Cartoon Kablooey is going to be a show about Paramount cartoons. That's what we're going to sell it on. And then afterwards, Nick realized, oh wait, there aren't enough cartoons here to justify a full show. Or maybe somebody made a mistake and thought Paramount still had Casper in their catalog. So they grabbed up the UPA syndication package and used it to fill out the show. But the contract was exclusively to advertise Paramount's content. Again, that's just my theory. As before, we don't have a complete list of Paramount cartoons, but here's what aired on the 2 episodes of Cartoon Kablooey that are available to me. First, from 1965, it's Les Boys, an entry in the Swifty and Shorty series about 2 conmen trying to find a little cash. Actually, this specific cartoon was a drastic revamp of the entire Swifty and Shorty franchise, with the characters being redesigned into this striking all-white style, and the characters reimagined as more Bert and Ernie best friend roommates. While previous Swifty and Shorty shorts were heavy on dialogue, this one was dialogue-free. A series of physical gags as Shorty tries to wake up Swifty for a planned fishing trip. And you know what? It's pretty good. I do want to emphasize that, while the Paramount cartoons were created on the thinnest of budgets and the shortest of deadlines, there were talented people behind these cartoons. And sometimes that talent, that drive to create something good, does come through. And speaking of, the next cartoon is 1965's The Story of George Washington, one of 2 Paramount cartoons by Jack Mendelson, a television writer who worked on shows like Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, The Carol Burnett Show, Three's Company, and a bunch of Saturday morning cartoons like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Tasmania. And he co-wrote the screenplay for Yellow Submarine, and he had a newspaper comic strip, Jackie's Diary, the daily recountings of a young boy, drawn as if the child was drawing the comic themselves. The story of George Washington is very much in the Jackie's Diary vein, a child recounting the American Revolution and the life of George Washington, and getting pretty much all the details wrong.
And the soldiers were freezing on account of they didn't have any warm food or hot clothing. So that pretty soon they caught all kinds of diseases, like bronchopneumonia, scarlet fever, and nagging backache. It looked like America was losing the first Cold War.
It's slight, but charming. But these were the exceptions to the rule. To see the rule, let's turn to 1965's Tally-Hokum, starring Paramount's brand new stars, Hangdog and Moxie Foxy. This was their only cartoon.
Well, trying to put one over on me, eh?
This is very much an attempt at the Looney Tunes formula, a fox hunt story with a very Bugs Bunny-esque fox. The character designs just aren't that appealing. What is with that nose? And the gags are about as basic as these things get. Finally, from 1967, we have Think or Sink, a story of an elephant named Roscoe who just breaks the laws of physics when he damn well pleases. So naturally, the most fun thing to do with this premise is to have him go to the doctor.
Heart gentle. A coin, please. Small brain. A coin, please. Trunk, size 60. Tail, sticks out nice. 2 eyes, that's good. A coin, please.
That's it from the episodes I have, but we can also infer some of the shorts from the opening and commercials, like the series played a lot of Honey Half-Witch, the misadventures of an adolescent spellcaster.
Magic wand, shine my shoes today so I can go outside and play. Stop laughing.
Like Swifty and Shorty, it also got a style change late in the game, though in this case, it felt more like a downgrade. And this little guy is Goody the Gremlin. The gremlin who doesn't want to play pranks and wreck things, he wants to help people. This is such a blatant attempt to create Casper 2.0.
Help! Uh-oh, that looks like some of their dirty work.
Guys, it's your own fault you sold the ghost. Cartoon Kablooey aired fairly erratically over the years on Nickelodeon. It originally aired on October 7th, 1990 to September 29th, 1991, sticking with its Sunday morning time slot. Then, on Friday, July 3rd, 1992, Nickelodeon ran a 3-hour marathon of the show from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., for reasons that are beyond me. And then the show returned for regular broadcast on September 13th, 1993, where it took a much more lucrative spot at 10 a.m. on Saturdays. It finally aired its last on Nickelodeon on July 1st, 1995. Sort of, because there's another caveat to this. Because the UPA and Paramount shorts also aired on Wienerville, Nickelodeon's bizarre puppet show / variety show / game show. Wienerville premiered on July 11th, 1993, 2 months before Cartoon Kablooey returned, and the two shows aired concurrently, Wienerville running all the way to 1997. Why? Surely Cartoon Kablooey was irrelevant with the existence of Wienerville, and you cannot say that mid-90s Nickelodeon was struggling to fill airtime the same year they premiered The Adventures of Pete and Pete, Rocko's Modern Life, and Legends of the Hidden Temple. I can only think of 2 reasons. Either someone really loved these specific cartoons, which did not do Looney Tunes numbers, or, more likely, Nickelodeon needed to fulfill their pre-existing syndication contract, and Wienerville didn't count towards that, I guess. We can only speculate, because Cartoon Kablooey is one of the more forgotten shows of this era. It was filler, but it was filler with a very interesting pedigree. The stories of UPA and Paramount Cartoon Studios mirror each other in fascinating ways. Both were companies born in the ashes of animation union strikes against some of the most iconic animation studios in history. Both were founded within a year of each other. Both ended up having similar abstract art styles. Both struggled to turn a profit into the television era, and both closed their doors within 3 years of each other. The difference was in intent. UPA was a place created by artists dissatisfied with the current system, who were looking to leave their mark on the animation industry with something new. Paramount Cartoon Studios was a corporate takeover of a groundbreaking studio and squeezing out every dollar they could. I suppose the lesson here is that, be you in it for artistic purity or capitalist greed, nothing lasts forever. The cartoons have all been pretty well preserved, thanks to frequent syndicated reruns and, in UPA's case, reappraisal that has warranted some pretty slick DVD releases. Still, you can find most of UPA and Paramount's cartoons on YouTube. They are not hard to find at all. Oh, by the way, after many decades, Paramount did eventually get back in animation in the 1990s, after a merger with a little company called Viacom. But that's a story for another day.
Nick, Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon.
Next time, Hanna-Barbera takes a brief pit stop on Nickelodeon before heading off to Cartoon Network. We've got a few research shoutouts today. First off, a huge shout out to viewer CDCB, who generously provided me with 2 episodes of the show. On the UPA side of things, we have When Magoo Flew, The Rise and Fall of Animation Studio UPA by Adam Abraham. It goes into a lot of detail in the studio's rise and fall, and is a key text in UPA's modern reappraisal. Really, I only had time to scratch the surface on UPA, and if you'd like to know more about it and the people behind it, I also recommend the Royal Ocean Film Society's 3-part documentary on the studio, link in the description below. Now, there's been no dedicated book on Paramount Cartoon Studio, so I turned to the old reliable. Of Mice and Magic, A History of American Animated Cartoons by Leonard Maltin, the revised 1987 edition. One of the first major books on animation history, with an entire chapter on famous cartoons and its output. Thank you all for watching. If you like support Knacks and other Pop Arena projects, consider contributing to my Patreon. Every dollar goes to production values, research material, and dollar store Halloween decorations. You can also support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, hitting that bell icon for notifications, leaving a comment, following me on Twitter, sending a one-time donation through PayPal or Coffee, and sharing knickknacks with all your friends. I'll see you next time, and remember, Black Lives Matter.